Welcome into the Scoop. I'm your host, Ross Martin, joined by Don Scoops Callahan. This is the Scoop brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. This is the Scoop. I'm your host, Ross Martin, joined by Don Callahan. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. We have a huge show. It's probably the biggest show we ever had. Probably one of the greatest podcasts we've ever had. We got Don here in the Nike shirt. It's April 20th. Happy holidays, Don.
Happy holidays.
And
are you celebrating today?
I'm not. Don't celebrate that. Don't condone it. But respect it. Okay, let's get into it. Here's what we're going to talk about, Don. Ready? We're going to get into the status and the state of UNC 2023 recruiting. You released your mock class, your first mock class on Tuesday. And maybe not the best class out there, but we're going to get to that a little bit. But overall, kind of give a view of kind of where UNC stands in recruiting for this cycle. It's been a while since we've done a podcast. We had March Madness, but it times out well with the mock class you released. That's for premium Inside Carolina subscribers. We're then going to talk about some of Mac's comments about that kind of 2023 recruiting, and that will lead nicely into our interview with Patrick Suddes, UNC's general manager, kind of the roster guy for UNC. A new hire came to UNC in February. So he's really been on the job for a couple months now. We interviewed him, spoke about 25 minutes with Patrick Suddes. And after that, we'll wrap it up with some spring football talk. We had interviews with Mac Brown, Gene Chizik, and Phil Longo on Tuesday from the team side of things. And so Don's going to kind of, we'll talk about a little bit of the team stuff as we head out of the spring into the off season, and maybe some additional kind of status of each other in our lives as we reconvene for this podcast. Don, thoughts? How are we feeling?
I'm feeling good. As you mentioned, we haven't done a podcast in a long time. When I was at the spring game, kind of walking amongst the crowd, that was the topic of conversation. When are we going to do another Scoop podcast? So I'm glad to be here. I definitely have some questions for you later on in the podcast. And so let's just get rolling.
Great. And the interview with Pat Suddes is great. So definitely stay on for that as we dive here into the 2023 class. All right, Don. UNC's 2023 class, they have one commitment right now here as we sit on April 20th. That is Tad Hudson, the quarterback out of the Charlotte area. Now, at this time last year, I did the math. I looked at last year's class. In the 2022 class, at this point in April, UNC only had 4 commitments. So it's not like they're super far behind. Malachi Hamrick committed, Trevion Green, Tayon Holloway, and Tyshawn Chapman. They committed a long time ago, those last 2. So, look at it, UNC's not necessarily far behind in terms of commitments, but there is a lack of momentum, a lack of big names, a lack of traction with any of the top targets. And so I just want to get your take initially, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit with Suddes, and he has some good insight into it. But I think what is happening, and this would be nice if this is what consistently happens, is that it seems like the cycle is starting to kind of fall into this, schedule of from January until May, just a bunch of just visits, mostly unofficial, some unofficial visits for recruits. And recruits are keeping an open mind about who they're interested in until they take a bunch of visits. Obviously, there are a ton of exceptions to this. So I don't want in the comments, bringing up Michael Dougherty committing and all that sort of stuff. I'm just talking in general because I'm trying to pigeonhole like thousands and thousands of recruits. But in general, a bunch of recruits are taking a bunch of visits in the spring, narrowing things down, and then purposely waiting until June to take official visits. You'll probably see a couple of official visits towards the end of May, just because there's only 4 weekends in June, and you obviously get 5 official visits. It makes it a little bit easier if you can take those officials on the weekend. And then sometime during the summer, making a verbal commitment. So with that, UNC is going to see a lot of activity from the commitment standpoint, mostly in June. Whereas the spring is just kind of more for just getting guys on campus. And Suddes touched on that. It's for them, the way that they judge it is they want to get guys on campus, and that's what they've been able to do during the spring.
Yeah, and Suddes and Mac Brown yesterday both were optimistic, and obviously they're going to be.
Yeah.
But they feel they're in a pretty good place with some of the names they're targeting, and they're getting a lot of visits over the spring from basketball season, and we'll have more and more as we enter April, May, and June. Two other notes: UNC last year had 4 players commit in June, and they had 4 more commit in July. And remember, that was still kind of COVID in terms of visits and people. There was a different type of evaluation, different type of visit schedule in terms of coaches visiting schools. I don't even remember just what happened, but and players visiting schools. So it was just different in terms of how the recruiting calendar went. We're now at a point where things are back to normal. Coaches are gonna be out on the road in a week, I believe, for their spring evaluation trips. Like, I guess 2 or 3 weeks they can visit schools and stuff. So you'll see some momentum with more offers then, and maybe some more traction with some recruits, and then of course the visits to happen May and June as kids finish school. So wait, I mean, your mock class, it's not super impressive in terms of where it would rank. I didn't recognize a lot of names. I haven't dove too deep into the 22 class, but I remember when you named the 20 most wanted, 10 most wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't many names from that were on your mock class.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of momentum. And I think you mentioned that earlier. Right now, it's UNC's coming off a awful bowl game, a disappointing season, and then in addition to that, in state, the talent is not as deep as it has been. And we're used to, what was it, 2 classes ago was a historic year in the state of North Carolina. There's been a drop ever since then. Last year, it wasn't such a big deal because North Carolina was able to go into Virginia and find a lot of success, particularly in the Tidewater area, although they got Andre Green out of Richmond, and then Zach Rice out of, I guess that's Central West
Lynchburg.
Virginia. Yeah, Lynchburg. But all those guys are sort of connected in a way. This year, Virginia is not nearly as strong as it was last year, particularly the Tidewater area. The UNC's recruiting basically 2 guys, has offered and highly recruiting 2 guys out of that Tidewater area, and neither one of them are national recruits like George Pettaway was, or like Tyon Holloway was. So there's not a whole lot of excitement. It's not as much of a big deal when Paul Billups, for example, comes and visits North Carolina, as it was every time George Pettaway made a visit. It was huge. Every time Zach Rice made a visit, it was huge. So that's kind of what the situation is. And North Carolina is being forced to jump into Georgia and Florida to recruit those guys. And that takes some time, because UNC's further away. You got to get those guys on campus. They're not as familiar with the program. They haven't been visiting it since their freshman year. So it takes a little bit of time to establish some footing with those guys. And you have all the turnover on the defensive side of the ball, the turnover on the offensive line. Really, if you're looking at this class, and my mock class kind of shows it, the offensive line and the secondary, if you take those 2 positions, I have 10 guys projected to be signed total between those 2. That's almost half the class. And those 2 position groups have underwent very important position coach changes. So it's going to take some time. And we've seen with offensive line, for example, there's some guys North Carolina was recruiting in January that they're no longer recruiting. They offered and recruiting in January, no longer recruiting because just a different philosophy. Coach Bicknell is going to like different prospects than what Coach Sherrills did. And, in the same sort of situation played out, maybe not to the exact extent at the DB position too.
Yeah, with Gene Chizik and Coach Charleston Warren coming on the defensive side of the ball, that is a great point. Okay, so is there any names that you think UNC is really getting traction with that we should expect a commitment from anytime soon? Is there anybody you can say that you think UNC is really leading with, and there's momentum towards a commitment soon or anytime, or is it just wait till June?
Well, I think wait till June is the short answer, but the layup answer there is DJ Geith, who his dad played in North Carolina. He was incredibly excited when UNC offered. I've been texting with him, and then when they offered, and I texted with him that night that they offered, I was like, hey, because it was like he tweeted it out. It was fairly late because I think he didn't get the offer until after his track meet, and so it was later in the day. And I was like, hey, I know it's late. Love to talk to you, do an interview about this offer. We can wait till tomorrow if it's too late. And he was like, no, 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 no. Let's do this now. So he was super excited when we got on the phone and everything like that. So obviously North Carolina is a great spot with him. But even with him, he wants to take his visits. He gets an offer from North Carolina a week ago, and this past weekend he was visiting South Carolina. And Clemson's showing some interest. So I think he's going to explore those opportunities like everybody else. So it would not shock me if we don't see another commitment until June. Now, could there be someone who pops unexpectedly? Yeah, this is recruiting. You got to expect the unexpected. But I expect, most of the move. I expect, all of the movement basically to be this summer.
Yeah, and even Mac was like, man, I like to have these commitments in by February. So he is kind of like antsy about getting some guys in because he likes to have it all set and be able to focus on the season. And move on to the next class by the time the 2022 season starts. So it's certainly something to track and watch, and it seems like.
Well, I actually think it's probably better that it's going slower. One of the knocks with Mac when he was at Texas was that he was taking commits so early that he was missing out on guys who developed later, and some kind of pointed to that as his demise at Texas. So it's probably working out a little bit better for Max so that he can actually, his board can settle down a little bit more before he's collecting commitments, and he's basically collecting commitments with the crowd right now.
There you go. Yeah, you're not holding back on some takes today, Don.
I think that was my only take, only hot take.
Yeah. Okay. We good there? Anything else?
No. I mean, do you have any more questions?
I mean,
was there anyone? All right. How about this? Was there anyone on my on there that you're surprised wasn't on there? Any name, just for whatever reason.
Surprise was not on there?
Yeah, surprised that I did not include them.
Dude, I mean, I don't know the class well enough. I mean, I feel like I always liked Rico Walker.
Okay.
But
So Rico was kind of, when I was putting this together, he was kind of one I was on the fence about.
Okay.
And the reason being is that I hear a lot of SEC buzz, particularly with I probably shouldn't open this can of worms, but the NIL stuff. But he constantly visits North Carolina, and I'm a big believer in following the visits, but obviously it's not foolproof. So I was kind of torn a little bit, and I wouldn't be shocked if Rico Walker is on a future mock class by any means. I did mention him in there. And a lot of this it's just so hard. And I think we'll get a better idea. I think he's supposed to come out with a new favorite schools list that's going to be a lot more limited than his prior ones. It might be like 3 or 4 schools. And if that's the case, we'll get a better idea of just where he's at and what visits, what's his plan on for certain things. But I'm not saying by any means North Carolina is out of the Rico Walker race. I think UNC is definitely in the thick of it. It's just, I wanted to pick, 5 defensive linemen, and I feel better about North Carolina's chances with those 5 over Rico Walker as it stands today. Tomorrow, that could be completely different.
Yeah, and you were pretty clear that this is going to be the most inaccurate of your mock classes just because there's so many unknowns, such a lack of momentum with certain recruits, and the overall class is kind of very slow to matriculate. It's good to see Jamal Jarrett on there, fellow Grimsley Worley former teammate of Travis Shaw. But yeah, I mean, there were names on there I'd never even seen before.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is like these guys, and that was the other thing. So there's a lot of guys where I was told UNC, he really likes UNC. He really likes UNC, but hasn't visited yet, plans on visiting maybe in May, if not in June. I didn't feel as comfortable including guys in that situation because they hadn't visited. And a lot of these instances of guys who I'm sure you're not familiar with, they either a Florida kid or a Georgia kid who visited one time, mentioned North Carolina's in his top 4, top 5, and it's going to take an official visit. And from what I've heard from sources close to that person and sources from UNC's end is that things are going really, really well with that recruit. And it's just kind of just putting the pieces of the puzzle together. It feels like a comfortable projection. But like you mentioned, yeah, I mean, there's so many unknowns, and there's so many dominoes involved with some of this stuff too that I expect some changes.
There you go. All right, good stuff, guys. Make sure if you're not an Inside Carolina subscriber, make sure you subscribe to Inside Carolina. There's tons of deals every other week. There's some big discount. So get on Inside Carolina. And then with that, you can read all of Don's intel. There'll be tons of recruiting momentum and intel this spring and summer, especially in basketball too, with transfers and tidbits here and there on the roster. And then of course, basketball related recruiting stuff with Gigi Jackson, etc. And with an Inside Carolina subscription, you get 10% off discount code to Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com, your one-stop shop for all your UNC apparel needs. Done right now. It's a beautiful day in Chapel Hill, Carolina blue skies. It's 64 degrees.
Ooh.
It's going to be down to the 40s tonight. You know what that means?
That means what? Leggings.
Sweatshirt weather. So go to Johnny T-shirt.
Dress in layers.
There you
Dress
go.
like an onion.
Here you go. Get your jackets, get your sweatshirts. You know, the spring is a great time to rock that new, fresh Carolina sweatshirt. Get all your UNC apparel needs. Get that jersey, the UNC basketball jersey, football jersey for a darty. You know what a darty is, Don?
I do not.
A day party. So get everything you need from Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com.
When's your next darty?
My partying days are over. So it's local company, locally owned. They support us, and we have a 10% off discount code. They're on Franklin Street and online at JohnnyT-shirt.com. A great deal and a great customer service. Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com. Okay, Don. We're going to bring on Patrick Suddes. I mispronounced his last name to start the interview. We've already recorded this, so we know what we talked about. So it's a great interview. He is UNC's general manager. He talks about his job, talks about working with Nick Saban, with Coach Brown, talks about the process for offering. It's a great interview. So check that out right now. And we'll be right back with some, we'll just talk about the interview and we'll get into some team stuff for UNC football. You're listening to The Scoop. And welcome back to The Scoop. I'm your host, Ross Martin, joined by Don Callahan. And we have a very special guest today. Our interview with UNC assistant AD and general manager Patrick Suddes. What's going on, Pat?
How we doing, guys?
Great. And we want to bring you on because you're a new hire for Mac. You were brought in, I guess, was it January?
Beginning of February or mid-February.
Okay, so after
I've lost track of the days now. So sometime around there.
Yeah, so after the 2022 class was signed, you were brought in. We're gonna get right into it with some questions. We have a bunch of things, kind of explain your role, what you do, and then get kind of the weeds of recruiting and roster management. So first, I mean, you left Georgia Tech to come to UNC. And I was kind of wondering what went into the decision-making process to go into interconference and come to North Carolina.
Yeah, I always had tremendous respect for the UNC brand growing up. Even living in Atlanta, always enjoyed watching UNC football and basketball. And then obviously the chance to work for Coach Brown again. We were only together 1 year at Texas, but it was one of the best years of my life as far as working experience. He's just an unbelievable human being, unbelievable coach. And it's not often you get to work for a Hall of Fame coach, someone that's already in the Hall of Fame in your career. So just jumped at the opportunity to have a chance to work with him again.
And along the same lines of working with Mac in Carolina, like people always talk about UNC football as a sleeping giant. From your perspective, kind of coming from an SEC background, what's your perspective of UNC football and what it can be, the recruiting base, and kind of, which makes you make a move from a place like Georgia Tech to UNC, the advantages UNC football has and can be?
Yeah, I think if you look at the history of UNC, they've always, had really tremendous seasons. Sometimes back-to-back seasons, but it's now just trying to build something and maintain it. But it's just, one, it's an unbelievable place to live. You have a chance to win all your games, and then you have the academic piece on top of that, where it's life-changing for the people that go to this university. So all those things added up with Hall of Fame coach. It's just, even just being here, I see why everybody. When I first took the job, they said ad nauseum, people say how much they love Chapel Hill and never leave. that is the case, but I see why they say it. It's an unbelievable college town, unbelievable place to live. I'm excited to raise my family here. And I just, for a student athlete coming in, it's got everything you would want out of a university. And I think we're poised to continue to take that step. And everywhere Coach Brown's been, he's won. So he's a proven winner, and we're excited to continue this thing.
So Pat, I wanted to get into exactly what you do, because I think a lot of fans, they've seen your name because this position has actually, I guess, gotten a lot of fame the last couple of years. Your title is what, general manager / assistant AD, but what is kind of, I guess, your daily routine? I think that best kind of shows just what you actually do.
Well, what I love about this job is really the daily routine is you never know what it's going to be. You can have a set plan of what you think it's going to be, but every part of the year is different. Obviously, right now we're getting ready for spring eval period. Our coaches will hit the road starting next week. We've obviously these last couple of months had a bunch of kids on campus. So for me, I oversee all recruiting, and recruiting is really broken down in different stages. It's the identification piece. So I have a group of people that work for me, Daniel and Julian, and a bunch of students that help find names along with the coaches of guys to watch, to evaluate. Then it's the evaluation piece, which I oversee all that as well, to figure out if we want to offer a kid, do we want to get the kid to camp, do we need more info on a kid, and all that. And then it's the marketing piece. Once we decide, hey, we want this kid, let's offer him. We're full speed. How do we get this kid? What are his likes? What are his interests? How can we best attack that? How do we get him on campus? How do we get him on campus as many times as possible? And then how do we close? And then now with the transfer portal piece, you've got your high school evaluation process, all that, and then you've got your free agency with the portal, and just making sure we're monitoring that. I have somebody in charge of watching that. So that's just another piece that's thrown in there, and we have a great staff, a great on-campus team with Alex, who I know you guys are going to get a chance to talk to, Molly and Jess. They do a great job with that piece.
Great. Yeah. We're going to talk to Alex on another episode. We're actually interviewing her after this one. A little behind baseball there. No, it's all good. Just want the listeners to be clear there. So your answer, I had a couple of questions. The marketing thing, I've never heard it really called that. Like once you identify a player, offer a player, and evaluate, offer, the marketing part of that, figuring out the interest, getting them on campus. Can you kind of build on that in how in detail you can go? I'm sure, you're talking to the grandmother, you're talking to, the principal, the teacher. Can you elaborate a little bit on kind of that answer? And once you figure out that you want this player, what goes into building that marketing plan to eventually hopefully get him to commit?
Yeah, first you have to find out who are the key, whether it's family members, coaches, 7-on-7 coaches, whoever's the key person in the recruitment. It could be multiple people. That's the most important thing. Could be the kid making the decision. A lot things have changed a little bit even since I've been in this business, where kids are more and more making the decision. And it's not necessarily sometimes the parents or the high school coach or whoever, but find out who the decision maker is. Then find out what are they like? What are the reasons they would come to UNC? Then we have a graphics plan. We have a graphics department that does a great job coming up with different graphics for kids. We have the personalized video piece now, which is new this year. So I think you guys have seen on Twitter some of the guys that have come in for photo shoots, whatever. Well, then we send them a personalized video from that photo shoot. So all those type of things go into the marketing piece. And then once they get on campus, it's not just a cookie cutter. Okay, they need to tour this, they need to tour this. No, what exactly are they interested in? If they're interested in the business school, whatever they're interested in academically, is the strength coach going to be one of the most important pieces for them to develop? So we might have, the coach has talked to them even longer than he normally does. What is the key piece? Which most kids today, the key piece is development to play at the next level, right? And so with the coaches we have on staff, and especially bringing Coach Chiz and Coach Warren in, we feel we have a tremendous piece with that from their background. So all that goes into the marketing piece.
Yeah,
So
I got one thing, Don, before
Sure.
I know your question's coming up, but I know your predecessor, Billy High. I interviewed him a couple times before, and he spoke about how like he was constantly texting with Mac Brown, like always in communication. I was wondering kind of your perspective. I know y'all probably have different personalities and stuff, but what's your interaction day to day with Coach Brown and with the other, 9 or 10 position coaches now, and how that kind of works out and your communication level with them in terms of recruiting and roster building?
Yeah, so Coach Brown doesn't sleep. If you guys didn't know that, I don't know when he sleeps with the texts I get and the staff, whatever. But that's why I wanted to come work for him, because he's as detailed as a coach as I've been around. No stone is left unturned, and his mind is always working. And as a head coach, there's so much stuff that is on his plate. It's amazing that he's able to function day in and day out. I have tremendous respect for all head coaches, but especially him. So yeah, communicate with him all the time. From a coaching standpoint, we're always communicating. There's so many different group text chains that we're on. We use Teamworks as well. That's also a way to message out. But we have a message with all the 10 full-time coaches. I got a message with my recruiting group. And all that goes into that is, okay, this kid's coming on campus this day, this what time he's coming, or hey, coach, you need to watch this kid. And especially now with hitting the road eval season, my phone's going to be, I'll set the record for texts in a day with coaches hitting the road. And, because it always changes, you might have a set plan of hitting these 10 schools, but so-and-so is not practicing today, but this kid is practicing. So we got to get over there and get a chance to see him. So yeah, the communication is nonstop.
And you're coordinating all those visits during spring
Correct.
evaluation, pretty much like travel and who
Yeah,
needs to go where and when.
The coaches will put together their schedule, but there's obviously I'm kind of the one that puts the master plan together and makes sure that all lines up. In spring eval period, you're only allowed to go to a school twice. And there's certain schools, obviously, we have multiple prospects at offense and defense. Only 2 coaches can go per visit. So if you have a school with multiple offensive defenses, that's where the puzzle piece comes into play. Okay, which 4 coaches, which 2 hits, making sure their schedules match up. That's kind of what I do once I get everybody's master plan.
Don?
Yeah, so I wanted to get into a question I get all the time. I've been getting it forever, is the actual offer process. So as specific as you can, player X, how what's the process for him to get an offer from you guys?
Well, we'll speak on what we do here. Every school is different. I think you even look at the numbers of kids that different programs offer versus us and some other schools. We're a little bit more detailed in our process. Obviously, the academics is very important. So we don't offer anybody until we get their transcript to see where they're at. Obviously, UNC's unbelievable university academically. We want to make sure they're a fit on that end. And Coach Brown wants to make sure, how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you're not taking care of your stuff off the field, what makes you think you're going to take your stuff on the field? So that's the first piece before we offer. But basically, and it could change depending on the identification piece. But our recruiting staff identifies the prospect. My staff will watch the film. We have a database that triggers. So if we write up a report on a kid, it goes straight to the position coach, goes to the area coach. They write a report on the kid. They like the kid. It goes to the coordinator. The coordinators will watch the film. If he likes the kid, it comes back to me. And then I sit down with Coach Brown. We watch the film. No offers get approved without Coach Brown's blessing. And that's kind of how we do it. And then we attack from there.
Do you have to see the player in person, or is it a lot of video these days?
It depends. Obviously, if it's a local kid, most cases we've at least seen them in person or somebody in our footprint. But if there's some sort of connection, with a kid from, that's got some sort of UNC connection from further away, if it's something we need to offer to get in the game and then get them on campus. And that's where all the verified, the camps, Under Armour camps, right? All these different camps that people do that we get the information on, that helps us. But we ideally you want to see them in person to get your own measurements on them.
So along those, I guess it's somewhat similar, but probably different. the transfer portal? Because I imagine that it's, well, I'll just let you, I mean, what's the process with that? How's it differ from when you're recruiting a high school kid?
The hardest part about the transfer process is it's like drinking through a fire hose. The recruitment could be a week, you know. So in most cases, if you see the kids that are transferring from different schools, there's some sort of connection where either that school was recruiting them before and they went somewhere else. There's a certain assistant coach on the staff that has a connection. There's usually some sort of connection because it's hard to get all the background info on these kids, because if you call their previous institution, they might not be happy with that the kid's entering the portal. So you're not going to get an honest assessment of who the kid is and all that. So that's why ideally you want to take kids that someone in staff has a relationship with, or you recruited them before, you know everything about the family. Because if not, it happens fast, especially the mid-year kids. You know, they're hitting the portal in December. You got to get them in school by January 4th. It happens fast. And that's been the hardest part about the portal. And the way they have it structured where they can enter at any time.
I've talked to Coach Brown about this a lot. UNC has a little bit, I'm sure every school has a little bit different perspective and take on how they operate with the transfer portal. What is your take and what's UNC's stance on the transfer portal? I know Max said like y'all only going to take people that fit culturally, academically, socially, but also that can start or likely contribute in a major way. Anything to add to that about UNC's transfer portal?
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. I mean, we want to take kids that have proven and played in college in most cases, because if you take a kid that you're not sure about if he could be a starter or hasn't played a lot, and then you get him and he doesn't play, you're stuck with him. He can't transfer again, right? Until he, you know, there's some different rules where the guys that graduate could potentially transfer another time, but that's why you have to be even more careful with transfer portal guys as far as who you bringing in, because you're stuck with them. With the high school kids now, you know, they still have the 1 year or the one-time waiver deal where they can transfer out if it doesn't work out or they don't like the playing time or whatever it is.
Yeah, I always think the old adage is there's a reason people transfer usually. So you gotta be careful with that. You can tuck that away, Don.
Thanks.
All right. So into roster building, I know that's a big part of your job. I don't know how much. I mean, I'm sure you have a pretty big role in maintaining the current roster. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's a lot of recruiting, but so I think this is a pretty popular topic on Inside Carolina and the message boards is the number of players per position and number of takes in each class on certain positions. I don't know how you want to approach this question, Don. I mean, like right now, for example, like wide receivers, y'all have 6 scholarship wide receivers. And I think you'll have 8 when fall starts. So what is your take on how you build a roster position wise? And I know that changes when you get different position coaches. I'm not really sure where this question is going, but you know, in terms of like prioritizing certain positions over other positions, like I always think you should take more offensive linemen, defensive linemen, other positions. But what's your stance on kind of building a roster, prioritizing certain things, and how that plays into your job?
This is your philosophy, I guess. What Russ is trying to say.
And maybe we can build off some questions off your answer.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, ideally you have certain numbers you want to hit at each position. I think scheme determines your ideal numbers. Every place I've been, depending on the scheme, the numbers per position changes. Obviously, if you're running a 3-4 on defense, you're going to have more outside backers and backers. Offensively, if you're more 12 personnel, you'll have more tight ends. So that all determines that as far as the numbers. But, you know, my philosophy and Mac's philosophy is really the NFL model is, you know, when they're drafting, there's certain teams that draft based on need and there's certain teams that draft based on talent. So like you were saying, you never want to turn down a really good defensive or offensive lineman because they're hard to find. Mm-hmm. So if you have to go into a year where you have more defensive linemen than your ideal number, I think that's fine because those positions are hard to find. So we never want to make need that priority where we take kids just to take kids to fill a roster spot, if that makes sense. Because like you said, we've only got 8 receivers. Ideally, you want more, but we feel really good about those 8 receivers that they can all play. So that's not always the case. You could have 12 receivers, but you only feel good about 6 or 7 that could play. So for legs, for bodies and all that, but that's where walk-ons and all that comes into play when it comes to practice and all that. And then the way we're using our tight ends more in the pass game, that also helps alleviate from the wide receiver position. But yeah, it's both. And now it's even harder now because you don't know who's going to transfer out.
Yeah.
In the old days, you knew exactly we have this many seniors at this position. We got to take, so hey, we got 3 senior linebackers. We got to take 3 linebackers. We think this guy's probably going to go pro. He has a good year, so we'll take a 4th if he does go pro. So you have those guys. So we still have that, but then you never know who's going to transfer now. It could be because of playing time. It could be because of whatever the case. So that's what makes it harder. So that's why we never want to turn down a good player, depending on position.
Think y'all had 3 or even 4 wide receivers transfer or leave early after the last year, which is why
right.
Problem.
Yep.
And what's the hardest position to find and to recruit?
Oh man, I think it changes year in, year out. Like there's certain years it's deep at certain positions, and certain years it's not. I think to me the hardest position is O-line, and I think if you ask NFL people, that's the hardest. It's the hardest to project. It's hardest to to see how big they're going to get, especially coming out of high school. How they'll develop. I think it's the hardest position to play as a true freshman, especially the tackle position. So for me, that's always the hardest one. I mean, quarterback's obviously hard because that's the one that makes your team go. But if you know that intangibly this kid's getting made of the right stuff, he's a winner. He's got all the ability. But yeah, O-line for sure for me is the hardest one.
So I know we're getting towards the end, so I want to get this question in. This current class, I know you can't speak about specific recruits and all that, but for me, and I've been doing this a long time, it feels like it's been like a slower process, not just for North Carolina, but also in general. Yep. Am I wrong in that? And if so, what do you kind of attribute that to?
Well, you got to remember, these kids haven't been able to go out in the springs the last 2 years because of COVID. So I think everyone's enjoying that process a little bit. I think that's part of it. For us, having new staff members coming in, reevaluating everything, especially on the defense side of the ball, kind of slowed some things down a little bit. But we feel good about where we're at. For us, we always follow the visits, and we've been able to get a ton of really good players on campus. We're set up. We'll have 3 big official visit weekends this summer, and so that will determine a lot. But I think you'll see it start pick up here before the dead period hits in July, because a lot of these kids too now, these high school kids nowadays are worried about the portal. I better get in and get my spot before that portal opens up, and teams are taking portal kids over high school kids. So it will pick up here, especially with our coaches hitting the road and all that. But we've been very pleased with the amount of quality players we're getting on campus. And usually if you follow the visits, those commitments will come down the road.
Watch what they do, not what they say, Don.
That's right.
So you said get out in the spring. Did you mean players to get out to visit or coaches to get out and do evaluation visits?
Both, but coaches go out, evaluate, and there could be some guys we don't know about. Usually not in North Carolina. We've got a pretty good handle on our area, but they're, in our footprint in the 5-hour radius, there could be some guys we find, going out to practices that we didn't even know about, because there's certain schools that maybe they don't get, coaches don't get to a lot that aren't a powerhouse school that you find. It's harder to do that these days because of all the camps that they go to, all the recruiting services, like you guys but you're able to find kids in spring, and that's how it was in the old days.
Well, it definitely feels like more structured in the sense that, like now, like you mentioned, a bunch of just unofficial visits. A lot of kids are taking a ton of unofficial visits, and they're all talking about, okay, I'm going to narrow it down by the end of the spring, find my 5, take those official visits in June. And I mean, just about everyone now is saying, I'm going to make a decision in the summer. So it's almost kind of strangely kind of structured it pretty nicely for us and for you guys too. So
yeah, and we'll do a majority of our official visits, this summer, which continues to be the trend in college football.
Okay, so I have one last question. I mean, I feel like we could talk to you for a while on just different topics. So we'll wrap it up here. You worked under Nick Saban for, I believe, 2 years with the Miami Dolphins, then 7 years at Miami. I mean, I think Nick Saban, he is the grand poobah of college football. So I was wondering what's that like, what it was like working with Nick Saban, anything you share about that experience, what you learned from him. Because I think that's a pretty unique opportunity and experience that you had with him.
Yeah, obviously forever indebted to Coach Saban for giving my start, but very similar to Coach Brown. They're different personalities, obviously. As you can tell, Coach Brown is definitely someone you want to spend more time with as far as one-on-one, but both are extremely detailed in the process. Both obviously have won a national championship. But I'm just blessed that obviously Nick's going to be in the Hall of Fame and one of the greatest coaches of all time. I feel the same with Coach Brown. So I'm just blessed in my career. It's hard to be able to do that, work for two Hall of Fame coaches. So extremely blessed.
Was there anything you learned from him or anything that he does you think makes him so unique and special?
I think obviously I got my start there. So there's a lot I learned under him. But every coach I've been with, I've been able to take a different piece. Like, I like this. I don't necessarily like that. The Alabama model doesn't work everywhere. Nick's model doesn't work everywhere. I think if you see some of the coaches that have gone on to be head coaches under Nick, some have been successful and some have not. The ones that have been successful are the ones that weren't just trying to be like Nick and try to do it their own way. They took different pieces, but just the attention to detail. And again, that's why I love working for Coach Brown, because the similarities with that piece of it and the attention to detail. And again, just for me in my career, I've just taken bits and pieces every coach I've been and been thankful and blessed to work for all the different coaches I've been able to work for.
Great. That was awesome, Pat. We appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you so much
for coming, and hopefully we'll talk to you maybe down the line soon.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys.
Okay, and we're back. Welcome back into the Scoop, brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt at johnnyt-shirt.com. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Inside Carolina on YouTube. You can see our beautiful faces. We upload every podcast to YouTube, all our interviews, all our press conferences, all the good stuff to our Inside Carolina YouTube channel. Don, what did you think about the Patrick Suddes interview?
I enjoyed it. I think he's a sharp guy. He's quick with, he has he knows exactly what's going on. He has to handle so many different things. I don't think people realize just what nowadays what's involved in his position. He mentioned the term marketing to recruits, which is you found that interesting. I know that. But just so many different aspects that he has a hand in with recruiting. I mean, this position is starting to get paid pretty well at the Power 5 levels because they're directly involved in the roster assembly, and he touched on a lot of that sort of stuff. And the thing too, so we've talked to Billy High before, and Billy's great. Billy is like a encyclopedia if you ever have a conversation with him as far as knowledge and stuff. Both of them are type A personalities. Pat, though, is a little bit more laid back. He still has a type A personality, but he's a little bit more laid back. You don't feel like the house is on fire or anything like that with him. So I like that kind of element to his personality that he brings to North Carolina. What did you think?
I was waiting for that. Yeah, that was great. I mean, it is a crazy job. I mean, it might be the third most important job on the team: head coach, strength and conditioning coach, general manager. I mean, maybe defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator in there too. But it is a critical job because they have a role in all aspects of recruiting, from evaluation, from offers. I mean, they're head of the department, so there's tons of staff members below them that are handling the analyzing and scouting these players. Then the offer process, which you work with the coaching staff, you work with the different assistant coaches, and then the recruiting aspect, the marketing of the program, organizing recruits, working with Alex White on campus recruiting, working with all the staff members and coaches to figure out the plan for recruiting certain players, and then when they're on campus, handling those visits. And there's tons of coordination. It's a 24/7, 365 job, and And it's a huge. I mean, we interviewed Billy a bunch of times, not on this show, but I did some break off interviews with him, and it's the same thing, man. It is a intense job, but I think it's an exciting job, and every day is different. And you have an intimate relationship with everything that goes on with UNC football in terms of the roster building and recruiting, which is the lifeblood of any football program.
I have an intimate relationship with my co-host.
Weird. Pause. All right. Good on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
as we mentioned
next.
Yeah, well, as we mentioned on the interview with Pat, we're bringing on Alex White, who we just mentioned earlier. The next time we record, which will be in probably 2 or 3 weeks, we have an interview. We've already recorded with Alex White. Really good stuff too. She's definitely a dynamic, vibrant personality, and so it's a different perspective on recruiting, a different role. And that was a great interview as well. So look forward to that on the Scoop. Right, Don?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm looking for that.
Okay. Well, we've got to do this, but looking back, we haven't talked in over 6 weeks. What has been going on? Anything in recruiting that we need kind of just to update? There was some visit weekends, briefly overview, kind of give us the calendar, the timeline of.
I mean, there's been a ton of visits, and Suddes mentioned that. He didn't name names for obvious reasons, but ton of visits. The spring game was a big visit weekend for North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Also, March 5th, which happens to be my birthday, was I guess their last junior day, and they had a bunch of guys there, and the recruits who came were able to watch practice. But then throughout the last really couple of months, there's been just tons of visits, particularly recently because a lot of kids are on spring break and they've taken advantage of that. I mean, just about, if you look at Inside Carolina's recruiting board, a big chunk of those guys have visited within the past couple of months. I could, go through all of them, but I don't know if that helps any. But there's been a lot of movement. And as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, that those sort of things will set the foundation, because it's more of like, here's a preview of what we're about. Hopefully that entices them to schedule an official visit. The official visit is where you hope to kind of close it all out with the commitment, which will happen shortly after that official visit.
Okay. And then what's happening? What's the next thing on the calendar? I know we mentioned kind of coaches getting on visits, getting out to high school visits. What do we have to look forward to the next couple weeks leading into June?
So this is the evaluation period, which we actually have, spring evaluation period, which we actually have not had for the past couple of years because of COVID. Last year the calendar didn't open up until June 1st, and basically they just went into summer camps and official visits and all that. So this will be a lot of they did some of this during the winter time for the winter evaluation period, but this will be a little bit more, I guess. You're spreading your net a little bit wider, I guess. You're probably a lot of the assistant coaches will try to visit all of the schools within their in-state territory, and then obviously branch out into their out-of-state territories. Or in a situation like Phil Longo, he recruit out of state. He doesn't have an out-of-state territory per se, but he recruits your quarterbacks. So he might go to California or definitely Texas to kind of watch a quarterback throw at a spring practice or just a workout. Bicknell will do the same thing for offensive linemen. Dre Bly might do that for maybe a DB that might be out of his area. So that's what's going on right now for the next for the rest of this month and most of next month. And then things I think kind of die down just a little bit and then just amp up a lot in June. As I mentioned, the official visits, but there's also camps. And the camps this time around be primarily for the next class, the 2024 class. The 2023s, maybe there'll be a couple here or there that maybe UNC has their eye on, want to kind of get a second look, and want him to, maybe he plays a different position in his high school, but wants to work him out at a completely separate position. They'll do that at a camp setting to kind of decide whether they want to offer. But camps, for the most part, will mostly be for underclassmen, not for this current class.
There've been some. I mean, I definitely remember players coming to camps of that year in that cycle and getting offers and committing. Right, the summer before the senior year, right?
Not really. Not last year is an exception because they didn't have the spring evaluation period. So you had situations like Bo Atkinson, who came in for a
Justin Canuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cognac was another one. But prior to that, I mean, the recruiting cycle was moving away from seniors scoring scholarship offers. Yeah, there definitely have been, but
Yeah.
for the most part, it's for underclassmen. And I think that progress is going to be even further moved to where camps are just for underclassmen for the most part, at
Okay.
least
And
for this level of football.
yeah, and I want to touch on something. So the coaching visits, you went into some detail there, but how many times can they visit a school? Like, what's just the whole logistics about how many
So
times and where they go and all that
Pat
stuff?
Pat touched on this a little bit. So they can go to uh, a school twice during
One,
this time frame.
one coach can go to every
No,
school twice.
well, so all right, a school can go to a college can go
Yeah.
to a high school twice within this time, right?
Okay.
But they can only have no more than 2 coaches visit at one time. And this is actually the old rule. I think it was Auburn when Tommy Thigpen was on that staff. What they would do is they had this caravan with all the coaches, and they would just bombard the school of their top targets and just show like, hey, we're so interested in you. We're sending our whole staff. And then other coaches were like, this is ridiculous. This is supposed to be for evaluation purposes, not to impress whoever. But so they scaled that back. So now they limited it to, I guess, 2. I thought it was more than that, but Pat mentioned 2, and I'm going to defer to him when it comes to anything.
Does 2 coaches visiting at one time count as one visit
Yes.
for that school? So then they can come back. They can send.
And from my understanding, you could have a coach come in that morning and then another coach come in that evening, because it's the same day.
And that counts as one visit.
That counts as one visit.
And then like in a week later, they could have another coach come in
yes.
And this is only assistant coaches. Okay. So you like to hit up
no head coaches. So head coaches can do it in the winter, but Mac Brown cannot in this spring.
Yeah. And so ideally you hit up, every high school twice in your region, maybe just once. And then hit up, a high school that's with your top targets or like a school that has a lot of talented underclassmen or whatever. And kind of pick and choose, but you could hit up as many as you want to, right? In terms of, you could hit up 50 schools.
Yeah. If you could hit up 50 schools one day,
yeah,
then
you
do it.
Could. Yeah. So you're
really, but, I mean, as somebody who goes to high schools, I mean, I think the most I've ever done was 7 in one day, and it's got to be somewhere like Charlotte.
Yeah. And you got to, just communication, figuring out all logistics.
And then some of the places like Eastern North Carolina, I mean, you can make it to 2, unless it's tough to go to more than that with the distance that you're driving.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Okay. Moving on. We introed with Marky X. Were you jealous of Marky X's mock class on the board?
So I honestly did not know it existed until you mentioned it. So I real quickly kind of looked at the thread on there. I'm going to pull it up again.
He has multiple threads, because every video he releases, he starts a thread, and I'm not even sure.
So he has multiple videos.
Oh yeah.
So I didn't know all this. So this is, I mean, you mentioned that this is, I guess, somebody who's regular. This is the first time I've seen this name.
No, I don't know this guy. I just saw it, I think, late last week, and then he's got two threads on the front message board page, on the first page of the message board.
All right,
Our Pit Premium. This guy's a paying customer.
I see. Okay, I see.
And it's just electric content, and he's super positive. And I don't know how much we should be really talking about this, but I was wondering if you were jealous of his mock class.
I mean, I think the mock class, there is an element to it that is a lot of fun. So, doing it, I'm not going to be jealous. I think it's cool if you want to spend some time doing it. For me, I know I'm going to be held accountable for whoever I put on or leave off. So I make sure I do a whole lot of homework on it. But I can see having fun with it. I mean, there's obviously, there's some similarities to who we have. Some of them I'm surprised that he included on there.
This guy does his homework, man. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think a good starting point is to make sure everybody who you have on there has at least visited. It looks like all these guys have visited North Carolina. So, but yeah, I mean, I try to be realistic with it because I mean, if you're just going to put a bunch of guys on there who, just because you want them, I don't know. I mean, but if you have fun with it, then if he had fun with this, then great. I mean, he definitely had fun with his rap.
Yeah. If you scroll down on his mock class, he goes, "These are according to my inside the brain sources."
Okay.
And after talking with the man upstairs through Easter weekend. So these are from his brain and from Jesus or God. I don't know how that works. These are the names I see in the 2023 UNC class. And then when we win 12 games this fall, I'm hearing from the man upstairs that Arch Manning, 6'4", 215, will also commit to UNC. Nothing confirmed as of yet, but I'm liking what I'm feeling.
I don't want to.
He's got Arch Manning to UNC.
I don't want to add to this I don't know, fable that he has building, but from I'm not following Arch Manning as closely as I follow others, but from what I know, it's hard to ignore Arch Manning. And every time you see something, you kind of give it a little look. But from my understanding, Arch Manning is in no hurry to make a decision, and actually might wait until the season to make a decision. So the timeline for him is lining up.
Yeah. Marky X, inside the brain sources. Definitely check out his YouTube videos. There might be some parental warning on that, on some of the language, but his rap is fire, and I do appreciate the shout out. Okay, Don, floor is yours.
I did not get a shout out.
I know, dude. I was surprised, man. It was me, and then it was Mac Brown, Phil Longo, Gene Chizik, and the whole UNC roster.
That is
Dre Bly.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel? I mean, you basically are included with a bunch of really famous people who have NIL deals.
Honored. Big career accomplishment. All right, let's move on. Don, the floor is yours. Okay. Spring football. Any questions? Anything you want to know?
Yeah. So I'm super behind on my research on all that stuff. So just keep that in mind. But the most interesting topic is the quarterback situation. I did listen to Mac Brown's press conference, not the one the other day, but the one directly after the spring game. And, he definitely was talking about how, both of them are similar, and, he might end up playing both. And he's not just saying that because he wants both of them to stay, but it would be beneficial for Mac if he can keep both of them from transferring, regardless of who he goes with. So my question to you is one of them actually better than the other and clearly going to help North Carolina win games over the other? Or is this just, lip service by Mac Brown?
Man,
try to keep both of them.
Yeah, I'm not God, I mean, it's not I don't want to, this is kind of a tepid answer. Dude, I'm not a QB analyst, and they both look good. They both have attributes you would like. I mean, I think it would be great to bring Greg on or Staples on to talk about this, but I think they're a little bit closer than maybe we thought. I think there was some momentum, just kind of like to give it to Drake May and kind of let that kind of be the starter and move on. But coming out of spring, it feels like it's closer than maybe we expected and many people wanted it to be. You brought up great points. It's to UNC's advantage to keep both. I think there's a chance both play. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of separation right now. They both have some leadership intangibles and some personalities you like out of your quarterback. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see both play significant snaps in 2022 to keep both on roster to have a viable backup. But it should be interesting to follow for sure. I think a big thing coming out of spring is I think Connor Harrell was very impressive, and I think I was noticed by players.
I worried about him because watching his film, there were certain things that worried me a little bit. I felt like, he played with I think it was 4 or 5 5-stars, and I'm not exaggerating. And I felt like some of those receivers and some of them end up are going to be DBs on the next level, but some of those guys kind of bailed him out on some of the throws.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah, you've watched him play a lot more than I have, but dude,
I'm not trying to discredit you. I'm just saying it's interesting what you're,
There was some impressive. It seemed like it wasn't too big for him. The role wasn't too big for him, and there was a high praise for him. And people we interview, these are UNC coaches and players that are going to be very positive. And look, we didn't watch him play, but one practice and one spring game. So, but I think they like what they have with him, and he can win and things like that.
Before you move on to the next thing, there last season there were a couple of programs who actually did employ 2 quarterback systems. One of them was Blake Anderson, former UNC offensive coordinator, who's now the head coach at
Utah State.
So he played 2 quarterbacks. There was another program that did it too, and apparently didn't have any issues and won some games. So it can be done. Be interesting to do it, to see if it can be done with North Carolina.
Yeah, for sure. It could happen. Okay, any other position groups? I'll just run through. I wrote a little thing on Phil Longo's takeaways on the offensive position groups. Check that out. Phil Longo takeaways, offensive position breakdowns. Wide receiver, like we talked about with Patrick Suddes, they have 6 wide receivers right now on scholarship. They'll have 8 when the 2 freshmen arrive in June. Very thin group. They like to have about 10 to 12 on scholarship. So they're gonna probably get 2 transfers and transfer portal, but you want those guys to be starters or at least kind of break into the 2 deep. So see what UNC can get. That's gonna be interesting to follow as well. I think a big storyline is using Bryson Nesbitt as a slot receiver, as a kind of a wide receiver out wide, as opposed to a pure tight end. I think you're gonna see him do that a lot. Longo said they're using the tight end more than ever, and they're kind of carrying the weight in the passing game. That's a direct quote. Kind of carrying the passing game, which is surprising to hear. We haven't seen that out of the tight ends. You got Kamari Morales, you got John Copenhagen, and you've got Bryson Nesbitt, 6'6", 220, who looks the part, physical, and has 1 year under his belt. So I think he's gonna be the big buzz for a breakout player there, Bryson Nesbitt. So that's pretty cool. I think running back, it's interesting to see British Brooks kind of be the guy. It's kind of cool that he came back for his 5th season.
And he's not from England.
That's right. Yeah, he's from Gastonia.
Gastonia is very, very far away.
Home of Greg Barnes. Greg Barnes, who is.
Speaking of Greg, I actually bumped into him and his family at the airport. Just completely, yeah.
Yeah, he's going to probably. Where did he go?
I think he went to the Keys.
Oh,
but
cool.
he was flying to. He was on the same flight as my daughter, because my daughter was going down to Georgia to spend a week with her mom, and he was flying. Him and his family were flying to Atlanta, I guess a connecting flight to go to the Keys.
Cool. Yeah.
Are we allowed to have Inside Carolina people on as guests? Maybe.
Yeah, I think we should have Greg on. He's on a lot of podcasts though. But maybe we'll have him.
He's too big time for us. Like, we might be too low on the totem pole.
I think he would enjoy. I would just want one where we just talk shop with somebody cool. Somebody.
Is Greg cool?
Yeah, Greg can talk shop with us.
Okay, but is he cool?
Yeah, he's great. He won't listen to this, so you'll never hear this. But,
yeah, he won't. He's not listening to this. We can say a lot of bad things about it. And Greg, you know the thing about Greg is Greg doesn't care. Like, we just talk really badly about Greg, and he just wouldn't care.
Yeah. So British Brooks, kind of cool, getting this. He's gonna be the guy. Behind him, DJ Jones. Like a lot of names behind him. DJ Jones, Elijah Green, a former Scoop podcast alum and guest. Yes. He had a little bit of a breakout year, it sounds like. He hasn't done much his first 2 seasons, redshirted 1 year. So he has some home run hitting ability, it seems. So it's good to see his name pop up from Longo yesterday. So DJ Jones, Green, I mentioned Petaway, and they're bringing Amari and Hampton. Didn't say much about Kamaro Edmonds. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I saw Edmonds at the spring game. I chatted with him a little bit. Just because I've known him for a while, and I thought he looked really good physically, because we've mentioned before when he was in high school, particularly during the COVID stuff, he put on some unnecessary weight, but he looked really good when I saw him.
Y'all could bond over that. And so we interesting to see what happens behind Brooks at that 2 and 3 running back spot, because in the last seasons it's been Michael Carter and Javonte Williams, and then last year's really Ty Chandler got the most carries. So. And then offensive line, new offensive line coach. That's going to be really interesting to follow. I don't know how good they could be. I mean, they were really high on Austin Richards, who's now kind of the most experienced guy along with Brian.
Does Zach Rice?
Let me finish here, man.
You're going forever.
I will learn from the best. I think Brian Anderson gets experience. I think Austin Richards has experience. They really like Ed Montillas, who has started games here and there for 3-4 seasons now. But then they also have William Barnes and your boy from Florida.
Caden Baker.
Caden Baker. And yeah, and then you had a question about Zach Rice.
Yes, Zach Rice. I didn't want you to move on to the defense before. So a lot of things which kind of lets him first team, second team. Do you think that he how much do you think he plays this season based off what you saw in the spring?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like there's an opportunity there for him at right tackle to at least get some snaps and get some time and maybe move into some sort of starting role or split starting role by the end of the season. He's doing all the right things. Got here in January. He has the size. He's going to have a full off season to get stronger. And they talk about him. When they talk about him, that usually means that he is playing a role and getting some snaps there. So there's some chances there. It'd be interesting to see how much Spencer Rowland plays when he comes in from Harvard. So that's another name to look out for. And I think Corey Gaynor and Brian Anderson will split time at center.
Okay.
I think they'll both play some, and that's good. It's good to have a backup at least, and it's good to keep that position rested. And so it's good to have like really solid depth there at center, something that UNC hasn't had. So good moves by the staff to bring in at least 2 offensive linemen from the transfer portal, 2 experienced offensive linemen from the transfer portal. So that'll be a position group we track heavily in preseason camp.
Not to interrupt you, but I didn't want you to move on. The center position is so key when it comes to communication. And I think UNC witnessed that firsthand last year. So to have some sort of consistency at that position, at the very least, will help with the communication.
Yeah, it's such a unique take there. I love it. A refreshing take. Communication is important in the center position. I love it. Yeah, I mean, and they have 2 veteran leaders. And Brian Anderson,
yes,
he may not be the best player, but he is a leader. He's likable. He
can communicate.
Yeah, and he knows what he's doing. Doing a lot of hunting, a lot of outdoorsing. I don't know how much football it is, but Brian's a good buddy of mine.
He was
he hunts and fishes a lot.
Were you were off the recruiting beat?
No, I covered his recruitment.
Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah, he was always enjoyable to speak with because he's a very personable kid. So I always enjoyed speaking with him.
And he's a guy who wanted to be at UNC.
Yeah.
Man, he wanted to offer so bad, and he got it. All right. Defense. Gregory wrote the defensive takeaways. I think Noah Taylor is going to be a really special player. We learned from Chizik about kind of that jack position, and I'm sure you've kind of gotten an idea of what the jack position is, but it's really just a pass rusher.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit lighter than the defensive end, can drop a little bit, but just an athletic, long pass rusher. And like a Des Evans is going to be a defensive end, but the jack position, like Noah Taylor, maybe a guy like Malachi Hamrick, and definitely Noah Taylor and Chris Collins. So that's what we have going on there.
So that's part. So if you include the jack, that's the 4 D linemen, right?
I was actually thinking that, and I need to ask Greg and maybe ask somebody on the defensive staff. You have the nose tackle, you have a 3 technique, you have a defensive end, and then I'm wondering if the jack is, so it's kind of like a 3.
It could be a 3 or a 4, depending on,
because they have 2 linebackers, right? They don't have an outside linebacker. They have 2 middle linebackers, and then 5 defensive backs. So it's a 4-2-5 essentially, right? So that works out.
Well, so I did talk to somebody with pretty good knowledge of both the prior system and this system, very intimate knowledge of it. And they said there wasn't like a whole lot of differences in the 2 schemes.
Oh, okay.
This person is very intimately involved in that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I was actually surprised. Obviously the terminology is all going to be different, and certain philosophies are going to be different, but like from the base of it is pretty similar.
Yeah, I think the big thing with Chizik is you want to simplify it, get down to the bare bones, work on fundamentals, make it very simple, make it easy to make decisions, and build from there. Adding certain things off of a base scheme and a couple different schemes, and then building from there. And so they're bare bones in the spring, work on fundamentals, how they want to coach certain things, and they'll get a little bit more complex, every day throughout training camp.
Chizik is always known for, if you've ever read any of his stuff, is always known for like simplifying things, making it as simple as possible so that, there's not a whole lot of thinking, it's just more doing.
Yeah.
I think
Is there
Bateman might have.
is there echo? I mean, is there echo here? I literally like just said that.
That wasn't what you were saying. But
That's
anyway.
exactly what I said.
All right.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, we love Bateman, but his was, I think it was kind of complex, which at times made it really good, and at times made it hard for some players to learn that. So they had tons of injuries in secondary. You know, I think Conley was out, Duck was out at times, Cam Kelly was out at times, Don Chapman, Day Hollins. So there are a lot of injuries in secondary, but they really like the linebackers. I think, you know, lose Gimmel, but he was a stud. But I think Cedric Gray was such a you know, a diamond in the rough. They found recruiting wise, it wasn't a massive recruit, but you know, he has a size. He broke out last year. They really love Power Eccles. You'll see him as a sophomore in a starting role, and Dilworth. They seem to be very happy with Sebastian Cheeks as well, the true freshman early enrollee.
That's the one thing Tommy Thigpen on the recruiting trail has always been able to do. You know, he's not as, you know, active as he was when he was younger and the first time around in North Carolina, but he's always been able to find that athlete. And because Cedric Gray was a wide receiver at Ardrey Kell High School, you know, but going back to, you know, Bruce Carter was a quarterback, Quan Sturdivant was a quarterback, and Thigpen, you know, found those, well, maybe not Sturdivant, but he was able to kind of develop those guys into, you know, what he wanted, made them quality linebackers.
And Cedric Gray's mature, a leader, you know, seems very bright and smart and mature for that position. Okay, we gotta get out of here, Don. Anything else?
I wanted to ask you how much time we have. Like 5 minutes?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your trip, particularly your Philadelphia trip. Where did you end up eating?
We
or watching, you wanted to watch
a
game.
We went to Gina. Oh, okay. We watched the game at some bar.
Just a random bar?
No, I mean, it was
was it Xfinity Live or was it
so I did go to Xfinity Live.
Did you like it?
For a beer. Yeah. I mean, it's not really my scene, but
yeah,
I mean, it's kind of like
very kind of commercial.
It's a massive sports bar. I mean, what it is. So in Philadelphia, all the arenas and there's the baseball stadium, the football stadium, and the hockey and basketball arena are all right there. They're all together. They share a massive parking lot. It's just this massive complex, which is kind of far. You can't walk there from downtown Philly.
No,
but it's not like in the suburbs. It's a 10-minute cab ride. And our hotel was right there too. Like we could essentially, we took a 5-minute little bus ride to the stadium, but I walked back from the stadium a couple times. And then there's this huge, massive bar called Xfinity Live. Within it is like 6 different bars, massive high ceilings. You know, there's like a freaking mechanical bull, lights, and all this glitz and glamour, and DJs bumping music, and massive TVs. And there's other bars. I went there with a buddy after one of the sessions. I forgot we watched the game. We watched like the Duke game and some other games at some bar. We got I'll tell you this hot take: cheesesteaks, man, they all kind of taste the same.
Depend. Did you get Wiz?
Yep.
Okay.
And I wasn't Jim Hawkins, Taylor Vippolis met some friends at Gino's, I think.
So did you do Gino's and Pat's?
Yeah, we were right there.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure they are exactly the same recipes. I think the preparation is different, like the cutting. It might be, you know, just the cutting is different from the two.
Yeah, and I had a couple, and they just, I don't know. I need to do a better job and find and I've done the touristy ones now. Next time I go up, I want to find like the real legit ones that are good and unique and different. I don't know, but I
like Jim's on South Street.
Okay, I think I've actually been there. Is that with the aluminum stuff, like second floor?
Yeah, it has a second floor where you can sit up there and kind of look out over South Street. So that's usually where I take people. But I think they have good steaks.
I think my first time, you call it steaks?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we watched a game at Misconduct Tavern downtown once, and then Founding Fathers Bar and Grill, which is kind of collegey, kind of 20s, like a lot of Villanova grads.
Well, that's the thing. Like when you asked me about where to go. It's like Philadelphia's such a huge city, and there's like
Yeah.
different like sub parts of it.
Yeah.
That's why it's real big on like if you're from Philadelphia, you say where you're from. I grew up in the Frankfurt neighborhood of Philadelphia. That's you kind of just stay within that neighborhood sort of thing.
Yeah, and then so I mean that was awesome. They won the Sweet 16. I would say where we stayed, he was just like I had to take an Uber to eat for every meal. We were on a food desert. We stayed at a hotel. It's like a Marriott.
It was close to the complexes.
Yeah, but kind of across the highway.
Yeah, because the complexes are in South Philly, and so it's away from a lot of the different stuff. It's right off the highway, which makes it nice when you're driving in. You drive out really easy. I've always liked that.
So it was tough. We just like to eat breakfast, to get a smoothie. You had to take an Uber in the town, and like there's no restaurant. We couldn't pop out and walk around and get any food. But so that was kind of a hassle. But it was great, man. They won those 2 games. Awesome game against UCLA. They beat St. Peter's, which is cool. And then New Orleans, what was wild as well. And it was. I always love Final Four runs. It's so fun. So it was a good experience. And beating Duke in the championship game was awesome. And then coming short against Kansas, but Final Fours are sweet, man. If you get a chance to go, listeners out there, it's really cool with all the 4 fan bases there, and the run is so exciting. Like, I didn't think I was gonna be able going to Philly or going to New Orleans. I went to both.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a basketball fan, but I was surprised that North Carolina beat Duke both times, especially with the whole Coach K farewell sort of thing. So we had a little get together on the Final Four matchup here. So had a lot of people rooting for Duke.
There you go. Okay. Well, I gotta get out of here, Don. I hope you all enjoyed this podcast. Hope you enjoyed the interview with Patrick Suddes. We'll catch you next time. Thanks to Giant T-shirt, GiantT-shirt.com. Please rate, review, and subscribe.